Hey everyone, my name is Will. I wanted to make a video about a walk that I did with my brother-in-law last month. We walked around the Imber Range Perimeter Path, which is a path that runs in a loop around parts of the Salisbury Plain, part of the firing range as well for the Ministry of Defence. It's quite cool. Um, so I took my Pentax MX along with me, along with a roll of Cinestill 800T, and just took shots sort of every kilometre, roughly, every couple of kilometres. Um, and yeah, I thought this video we could take a look at those shots and show you some highlights from the walk, including me falling into a hole. So let's get started.
So when I knew I was going on this walk, obviously one of the big decisions that I had to make was which film I'd want to load my camera up with. And yes, Cinestill 800T perhaps isn't everyone's first choice film when shooting in broad daylight, mostly surrounded by fields and some cows. But I've used it in this sort of situation before, and I actually really like the way it renders the colours of these types of scenes, especially if there's a lot of green. I think it really gives quite a cool look for very green based pictures involving maybe lots of fields. So I thought I'd give it a go again. I also made use of an 85B filter on the lens. I took a 50mm macro lens on my camera, and this did quite well in just balancing out the film a little bit in daylight conditions. As we know, it's tungsten balance film, so everything will otherwise look a bit cool, a bit blue. So rather than faff around with some post-processing, I thought I'd put a filter on the lens from the get-go, which I thought it worked quite well. Being around a 50-kilometre walk, we did have to set off quite early, as we did this in the autumn to give ourselves enough daylight hours, but it did mean we got to see quite nice hues in the sky before sunrise. As you can see, the sort of scenery is quite vast, mostly open fields, not too dramatic of a landscape, being in Wiltshire, sort of rolling hills here and there, and some cows, as you may expect. And that was really one of the challenges of doing this walk, was to try and keep it fairly interesting when taking photos along the way. I did try and take photos roughly every couple of kilometres, having around 36 exposures to make use of. So I am quite drawn to quite plain landscapes, mainly sky and foreground. I do just quite like that look and simplicity, so I did try to step away from that where I could, but it was ultimately not always possible to shoot anything but that, as you can see. And as promised, here's some footage of me not paying much attention instead of being distracted by the cows on the path and put my foot in a bit of a hole, which seemed to scare the cows off. As you can imagine, it was a bit of a relief to take the old boots off at the end of the walk, but it was a really good walk, really good conditions. We managed to do it in just over 9 hours, including a couple of stops. So yeah, I'd recommend it to anyone if you live in or around Wiltshire looking for a bit of a walking challenge, 50-kilometre walk. I can drop a link to an all trails route below. The following morning, actually, that I got around to developing the film from the walk, which is probably the fastest I've ever managed to turn around developing the film from shooting it. I just used some Cinestill CS41 chemicals and developed it in a tank in my bathroom. And yeah, this is my normal process. I don't follow any particular stringent developing procedures, but it usually seems to come out okay. The negatives looked fairly sharp, but I was looking forward to seeing how the colours come out. It's always difficult to tell that from the negative, so I had to see what the scans had to say. Okay, so here are some shots from the roll. I think what I was glad about when I first saw these is that my decision to use Cinestill 800T had definitely given me that look I wanted. Again, not a conventional choice of film perhaps for this type of lighting, but I think it gave me the colours that I was looking for. And as you see these, I I think I've put them in order in which I took them throughout the day, so you can see the lights constantly changing. But again, I think it's worth pointing out that a lot of these are that quite simple composition of just mostly sky and the foreground, which is fields and some trees, and of course some cows as well. We did come to a little bit of a small forest, small woods, so I made sure I took a couple of pictures of those while I was in there, just to switch things up a little bit. But I think my favourite photos are probably towards the end of the day, when there was a few clouds dotted around, which created these quite cool shadows in these open areas on the ground. I think one of my favourites is one of these last ones at the end, where it almost looks like there's a giant spaceship or something just hovering above, about to land. The definition of the shadows on the field is quite sharp, which is quite odd. We were on a hill at this point, so maybe we were just close to the clouds, which caused that definition. But yeah, definitely something I quite liked about this one. And yeah, some of these, I call them like Toy Story clouds, where they're just sort of fluffy, small fluffy clouds dotted around the sky, which I tend to quite like. So yeah, I thought there was some pretty good shots here. There's definitely a couple, or maybe a three of them, which I think would make quite a nice triptych of some kind. I think like this perhaps, and yeah, I'm glad I took my camera along with me. There's a few here which I would like to maybe print some of these in the darkroom, or perhaps get them sent away to be printed. I know they're not possibly to everyone's taste, and they're certainly not technically amazing photos, but I quite like a few of them, and at the very least they'll serve as a nice memento from the day.
Hope you liked the video. Feel free to like the video, leave any comments, subscribe. I might well make another video in future. I think this is just a good way for me to reflect on what I'm doing with photography as a hobby. So yeah, take care.